Hello and welcome. My name is Brian, and you're listening to Friends and Music with me, Brian Doherty, a podcast about all things music for those who are obsessed by it. If you or someone you know would make a great guest on this show, please feel free to get in touch. Also, I encourage you to subscribe to my podcast on your chosen platform. Most importantly, thank you for listening. My guest today is Gurf Morlix. Gurf is an Austin, Texas-based guitar player, composer, and record producer who's worked with Warren Zevon, Lucinda Williams, Blaze Foley, and Michael Penn, among many others. In this episode, Gurf tells us about his upbringing in Buffalo, New York, and how his fateful decision one day to choose the city of Austin over the city of Boston led him down the vast roadway of the music industry as a top guitarist and record producer. Also, we chat about his love of music, but in particular, how he feels about the perfect blend of country and rock. Gurf also recounts his days with Lucinda Williams and how he produced her records, as well as how the band got the keeper take of the song Change the Locks. Very interesting story. It was a great pleasure to speak with Gurf, and it was my honor to have him as a guest on my show. I hope you enjoy. Hi Gurf, how are you?
Hi, Brian. How's it going?
I'm doing pretty good, but I guess it's hotter where you are as opposed to New York where I am. It's about 90 degrees where I am.
Well, you know, it's over 100, or it will be over 100 here this afternoon, but somehow it's different. And, like 90 degrees in New York is somehow comparable to 100 in Texas.
Yeah, there you go. I hear you.
Somehow it's a different scale, and I don't understand it, but I'm very well versed in the weather of both places, and I know what it feels like.
There you go. Gurf, can you introduce yourself to us?
Hey, I'm Gurf Morlix.
And what is it? What is it that you do?
I write songs and I record them and I sing them in front of people when it's safe to do so. And I've been a musician all my life. You know, it's all I ever wanted to do, and I've been lucky enough to sort of have a.
I think you froze up right there, Gurf.
Of my first gig, which was probably 1965 or 6, my first band.
Nice.
We were called The Plague. I figure we were either 55 years ahead of our time or about 45 years behind our time.
I was just going to say maybe you guys should reunite.
No, these are strange times for sure.
Yes. I've been doing some research when I can I've been a big fan of your work, and you and I spoke last week, and I admitted that there's a lot of music period that I'm not familiar with, but there's also a lot of your work that I'm not familiar with, even though I have been a fan. I did read though that you're not originally from Austin and that you're originally from the East Coast. Do you want to tell us about the early years?
Sure. I grew up in a suburb of Buffalo, New York, and it was a great place to grow up, great place to be a kid. I wish I had gone to New York City when I was about 15 to complete my education, but I didn't get to New York City till I was probably 30. But I kind of ran out of musical opportunities in Western New York and ended up moving to Austin when I was 24, and it was a perfect move. Austin was just on fire, the live music capital of the world, and within about a week I was in a band making great money, and it was warm, and it was things were cheap. Rent was like $53, you know.
That's great.
It was amazing.
When I think of Austin, I mean, Austin got on my radar like in the 90s as like a hot place to live, a happening place. But why Austin at that point? Was it always known to be? Was it like comparable to a Nashville or a Los Angeles or?
Yeah, in its way, I wanted to play rock and roll and country music.
Right.
And there wasn't anybody in Buffalo area that was into both of those at the same time. And so I kind of ran out of opportunities, and I had a drummer friend that I was hanging out with, and he wanted to do the same thing. And he went to see Commander Cody and his Lost Planet Airmen.
Mm.
He went up and talked to Commander Cody at the end of the night and said, "Where should we go? We want to play country and rock and roll." And Cody said, "Austin or Boston."
Nice.
And Boston was cold, so Austin was the choice, and it could not have worked out better.
I'm remembering seeing Commander Cody for the first time on Don Kirshner's rock concert.
Yeah,
you ever watch that?
Oh yeah, religiously.
And that was my introduction to music. I was a child, but I was glued. Saturday night at 8:30 in New York. Whoever was on. It was my education.
There was some really great stuff on there in between a bunch of crap, you know?
Yeah. I think I just took it all in. I was a blank slate, but I remember Commander Cody, and that was, it's kind of hearing country music, I guess, or, rock, country rock,
They were doing exactly what I wanted to do at that time. And so we followed his advice, and Austin was just on fire at the time. It was just beginning to be the live music capital of the world, and it was perfect.
So this is a conscious decision. You made a conscious decision to get into the music business or to ramp it up. So go back a little bit. How do you get into country music? Do you have a family that's musical? Do you have friends that turn you on to different kinds of music?
Well, I was just always into music, and I can remember seeing Elvis Presley on the Ed Sullivan Show when I was 4, probably, and just going, and he's holding a guitar, and I'm going, that's what I want to do, and then when the Beatles came on the Ed Sullivan Show that Sunday night in early '63, and then it was all over. That's what I was going to do. And the next day in school, we started bands. And we chose our band members, and we chose our band name, and we started combing our hair down over our foreheads, and it was a revolution. And
did you guys have bass players? Were there guys willing to play bass?
You would be relegated to bass, if your dad gave you enough money to buy a bass amp, you could be in a band. If your dad had a van, you could be in a band.
Yeah.
In lots of cases, we didn't even get guitars or anything for a year, but we had the band name.
Right. Yeah.
We were a gang. We'd hang out after school, and but then somehow I managed to have some talent and perseverance and stay at it. And then I started, making a living when I was in high school, playing in biker bars, and going to school at 8 o'clock in the morning, and being in biker bars till 4 in the morning.
Where does the country music part come in? You describe yourself as part rock, part country.
Well, I think really it's more part rock, part blues, part roots, part everything that I liked. But in about 1974, I discovered Hank Williams. And Hank Williams is in the top echelon for me. For me, it's Dylan and Hank Williams and Muddy Waters and the Beatles, and then there's everybody else. And when I found how good Hank Williams was, then I all of a sudden through that I started playing pedal steel guitar, and then I started listening to all the country music I could find, and suddenly there was Merle Haggard and George Jones and Lefty Frizzell and Roy Acuff and all of that amazing stuff, and so I just dove deep in.
Right.
Meanwhile, still wanting to play rock and roll.
Sorry, I was a bit. If you heard some pops there, I was a bit distracted. I was making sure that my side of the audio was recording. That would be bad.
I hear
you. Only heard your side. I wanted to talk about. I mean, I've got a lot that I want to talk about, but tell us more about Austin. in the early days. And who are you meeting? Who are you playing with? Are you developing a network of musicians? And do you have your sights set on something else beyond it, and so on? And what are your first tours and of that nature?
Well, I moved down here, and like I said, I got in a band right away and was making a living. But all of a sudden, I realized people down here were writing their own songs. So, it was early '75 when I moved to Austin, and so here's Willie Nelson, and here's Jerry Jeff Walker, and here's B.W. Stevenson and Steve Fromholz and Doug
Right.
Son. All these people are in Austin, and they're songwriters. And so then I started playing with songwriters and really enjoying playing original music. It was all cover band stuff before then, and then some of those songwriters turned out to be pretty good. And I ended up, I worked with a guy named Blaze Foley around Austin and Houston for a while. We were kind of going back and forth between Austin and Houston. And then I ended up running out of opportunities in Texas in the late 70s. And in 1981, I moved to Los Angeles because I wanted to be touring nationally, and I was playing the clubs in Houston and Austin, but I wanted to go on tour with someone with a record deal, and so I moved to Los Angeles and kicked around there for a couple of years, and then finally I met Lucinda Williams, and we started a band, and then suddenly she got a record deal and said, "Who's going to produce?" I said, "Well, I'll produce it." And so I did, and then we started touring, and that's what I was looking to do.
Had you produced anything before that?
Yeah, I was always the guy with the tape recorder.
Mm-hmm.
I always could figure out where to put the mics and where to set the amps and the drums and make it sound as good as I could, and so I always had that ability. And then when we got the deal, and then I was going to produce it, and then I just had to slowly pull my foot out of my mouth and do it. And it turned out to be a great album that was really well received.
I'll say.
And so then that made lots more work. And that just kind of was the start of me being a record producer.
I want to circle back to Lucinda, but once because at this point I'm cognizant of who Lucinda Williams is, and I was really enjoying that record, constantly playing it. And
it's a really good record.
Do things get easier after that? After the record's over and done, as your name, are you accepted into circles, or the gates open, the doors open for you in the business?
Yeah, I got a lot more work as a producer then, and then I did some big bus tours. I toured with Michael Penn, and I toured with Warren Zevon, and we're doing bus tours with Lucinda, and then it kind of all just sort of broke down. It became not fun, and I had to bail on the Lucinda gig. It wasn't worth what I was going through. The music was great, the band was great, but I wasn't having a good time. So I bailed, and then
You mean sleeping on a bus is not fun?
Sleeping on a bus just makes it barely doable. It's like for about 3 or 4 days, the first 3 or 4 days, it's glamorous, and then it's like I don't want to crawl into that tin again.
I tell a story of touring where me and a bass player asked the band to just rent us a Lincoln Town Car, and then we'd meet you at the gig. Everybody else was on the bus, and that's the best way. We stopped. We had leisurely lunches. You
can stretch out and sleep in a Lincoln Town. I've rented those on my solo tours, and that's pretty darn comfortable until you get to a city like San Francisco or New York or something, and the LA, and the cars are about 4 inches from you on each side.
Exactly. I want to talk about the Lucinda record. Is that okay?
Sure.
Among other things, I've noticed that there's almost this perfect blend of rock and country on that record. Was that a Was that a concerted, did that just happen, unfold the way it was, or were you guys going for that?
Those were my sensibilities. That's what I wanted to do. And, I'd say for that first Lucinda record that I did, I was probably more influenced by like Jackson Browne than anyone else. He was doing that before we were, I think, sort of writing really good songs and then having a band that could rock. And so that's kind of what I was going for. It just made total sense to me.
Right. Were there ever moments where you felt like you were overstepping the boundaries of like maybe it's too much rock? Or do you ever have discussions with Lucinda, more country, less rock, and so on?
Oh, she loved it, and that band was so good when it was me and Dr. John Chambodi on bass and Donald Lilly on drums. And we were like the Who with Lucinda in front of us. I mean, that band was one of the best bands in the world at the time.
Yes, I'll say, yeah.
The live gigs, I don't think there are any tapes of those live gigs, but they were incredible. That band was so good.
I saw you guys live at the Bottom Line in, I think, 1991.
With the band? With
the band, yeah. And I had a slice of pizza with your drummer, Donald.
Okay.
And I think JD was playing bass. That's how I knew.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I remember those gigs. The Bottom Line was great. I missed the Bottom Line.
That's a great venue.
Yeah.
There's a simplicity of that album as well. When you're producing it, are you going for that? Or are you leaving, do you end up muting parts, editing things out later? Or is what you hear what you played live?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm not a guy that likes a lot of options, and my brain is wired pretty simply. I don't want to hear a lot of stuff going on unless the song calls for a rock squall or something. But I tend to like space.
Yeah.
And those were that was pretty much the way I heard it in my head, and then we just kind of put that down.
I'm thinking of the song "Abandon."
Oh yeah, I forgot about that song.
I mean, if you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's chordally, there's not much change going on, especially in the intro. You provide this great signature riff.
Yeah. Yep.
If that were not there, you probably hear an acoustic guitar strumming eighth notes on one chord.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to get at, and is if you could elaborate, like it's so brilliant. And often I don't want to speak for other musicians, but I have the habit of dismissing great musical moments as, that's really easy. Anybody could do that. And then when I circle back to it, I realize, holy shit, I could not do that. So can you speak to that? Can you tell us more?
It's just my sensibilities. And, I like to turn the amp way up and the guitar up and hit a chord and just let it ring. I want to hear what it does after the pick leaves the strings. That's the interesting part for me. And so I like the space, and then you just want a little bit of movement in there to keep it interesting. It's not just decaying. It's evolving. It's like a little vine growing through the room. And I just like that sound.
You don't play a lot of notes.
I'm not able to play a lot of notes.
Oh, come on. Musically or technically?
I'm shredding in all those songs. That's everything I got, but it seems to work. People seem to like it, and I like it. It's just, like I said, it's the way my brain is wired.
It's the perfect marriage of your sensibility, it seems, as a player and for the music. But in a song like "Abandon," are you free? Because that riff is part of the composition.
Yeah.
So is there ever discussion with the artist, whether it's Lucinda or others, about how much you can contribute and if it's part of the songwriting or not? Or is that a fair question to ask?
That's a fair question. And there was never any limitation placed on me or anything. I could have played every note I knew, but at the same time, you come up with a lick like Passionate Kisses or something.
Yeah.
And that's part of the song.
Yeah, that's
but I don't get songwriting credit on that.
That's what I'm rooting for you. I'm in your corner. I mean, even I Just Want to See You So Bad. Your riffs provide. I just keep. They're not only fantastic and fit the song so wonderfully, but if they weren't there,
yeah,
the songs would be a lot different.
Well, that's just the way it is. You don't get the songwriting credit for that unless you wrote the song yourself.
Does that? Because I'd like to stay here for a moment, but later I'd like to talk about your motivation as a songwriter, and if any of these moments, kind of like spark off in your brain, like, okay, I'm going to log this in because as I'm writing my own songs, I want to do X, Y, or Z.
I'm not sure I understand.
I'm saying, like, so here you are, you're collaborating with an artist, you're in a band, you're providing signature riffs that are that make the song identifiable. Mm-hmm. And does that are you aware of it at the time, and are you bringing that into your own songwriting when you're not in a band?
Yeah, hopefully I do that with my music. That's the goal. Is all I'm doing is trying to come up with the part that makes the song as great as it can be.
How did you guys form the band? Because I could say the same. We just talked about your playing. I could say the same thing, in my opinion, about Donald's drumming. There's so many moments where anybody else, including myself, because I'm a drummer, but I would have a tendency to fill, to add another hi-hat splash or play too much. But his delivery is friggin' perfect.
He was an amazing musician.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of drummers out there who I don't consider musicians. They can keep time maybe, and they can bash around, but
can we name some names right now?
Yeah, he was so musical, and he inspired me, because it was his a total of everything that he had really liked, and so he was into John Bonham,
Yeah.
It was, or like I said, we were like the Who sometimes, playing rock and roll songs, and I knew that I could hit a chord and just hold it, and Donald would play the exact right thing to answer it.
Yes,
it was magical while it lasted.
That's why. Would you say that's why we like to play live music, where as opposed to layering things in the studio or sending tracks virtually?
Too. Yeah, I like that too. That's mostly what I do these days. But there's just something to be said about being in a room with a bunch of people who are digging what you're doing, and
who put the band together?
It just kind of fell together. Originally, I was the bass player, and there was a while. Pete Anderson was involved for a little while. He was going to produce Lucinda. And he had at one point Lucinda playing electric guitar and me playing acoustic guitar, and there was some experiment going on. But we just had these little gigs in Hollywood, and it eventually just sort of gelled down to Chambody and me and Donald and Lucinda. And
nice.
That's just what worked.
What a great combo.
It was amazing.
Can you tell us about the actual sessions? Were they quick? Were you doing a couple songs a day? Were you rehearsing? Was there a lot of pre-production, or what was the approach?
Well, we didn't have much money. We got this record deal from Rough Trade, and so I think we had like a week. Maybe it was 2 weeks. It was a week or 2 weeks. I probably have that written down somewhere, but it was either 1 week or 2 weeks. And so we did a couple of days of rehearsal, and then we just went in and just kind of banged it out live. And then once in a while we'd have to re-sing a vocal or something, but there was no time to agonize over it.
Right. Beautiful.
Because we had a finite amount of money and a finite amount of time, and it came out really good. And then after that, like the next record, we had like $150,000 to spend, versus the 12,000 we had on the, and that just opened up a host of problems. And
Yeah.
how am I going to spend this money?
Are we?
I told the A&R guy at one point. He said, "Well, your budget's $150,000," and I said, "Well, I could make this record for $15,000." And he said, "Don't say that. Don't let anyone hear you say that. It'll ruin it for all of us." So I had to figure out how to spend $150,000.
That's too much.
Insane.
Well, it sounds like it changed your experience, but did it sour any moments where did it pull the plug on certain areas, or?
Well, the music was still pure.
Mm-hmm.
And the band was still great, but it just, I didn't like looking for ways to waste money.
Right.
And those days are pretty much gone now. There's few records being made that have big budgets, but
you can always waste more money by writing songs in the studio on studio time.
See, I didn't think about that. We were having catering and a guitar tech in the studio, and
right.
Bringing in a guy with 50 snare drums to audition.
Yeah. Oh my Lord. Tell me about the drum sound that you got with Donald on that first record. Well,
it was a tiny room. I'm not sure Donald was the only thing live in that room. My amp was in a booth, and Lucinda was in a vocal booth, and the bass player was in the control room. But that room was really tiny and probably fairly dead. So there's probably a little bit of digital reverb on there. And,
yeah.
But Donald just knew exactly how to hit the drums, and he knew how to tune his drums. And I've never worked with a better musician.
He was amazing. Just what he did. Again,
we did a track of Change the Locks.
Mm-hmm.
And something happened and we were having some trouble with it. And then all of a sudden there was like this bickering between Donald.
He starts with that fill. That song starts with a fill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Donald was great at that, but
yeah.
we hadn't gotten the take yet. We cut it 2 or 3 times, and finally Donald got mad, and he goes in there and he puts the phones on, and he said, "All right, everybody, here we go." And he threw his phones off, and he counted the song and played. He knew the song. He wasn't hearing anybody else.
Okay.
And he got done with the song. We were just playing along with him, and he threw his sticks down. He goes, "God damn it, that's the take!" And he stormed out of the room into the control room, and that was the take.
That was it for Change the Locks?
An amazing performance. He played the song without hearing anybody else.
That is an amazing story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, what a great song too.
Yeah, it's a really great song.
Are we hearing anything on that record that you remember as like a second take or first take, or?
I don't remember. We probably never did more than 3 takes of anything, and I remember redoing a vocal or 2.
Are you the other singer on that record?
Yeah. Yeah.
So by the way, you're an amazing singer.
Thank you.
And your harmonies have a habit of weaving. You don't just parallel. You weave.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit if you want?
Well, yeah, sure. Harmony singing is what I've been doing the longest. I remember being able to sing harmonies when I was like 5 or 6 or something. And
right.
I remember my mom was kind of just taken aback by the fact that I could do that. And then in one of my early bands, I was just the harmony singer.
Okay.
I needed someone to sing, and so I just kind of stood there and sang harmonies, and then I just put some thought into it. It's like I don't want to just be predictable and do a linear thing and just follow the melody up and down. It's like I want it to come in here and there and be interesting, and sometimes it's one note straight across. I'm just looking for the right part. And if you look hard enough and you're smart enough, you might find it.
They are exactly as you described. Do you ever play them on guitar first to see if they work, or are you singing them?
No, I hear them in my head. Usually the first or second time I hear the song. Also with the guitar licks too. It's like Lucinda would play the song and once, and I would listen, and then she'd play it again, and I would play something along with her. And more often than not, that would become the signature lick.
That's amazing. I don't think I can say that. I can't say that I've heard that story often, where it's kind of just gels right away, right?
It just made sense to me. It's just common sense.
Some of the a lot of your harmonies are very close, like they're very they can get close and kind of tucked in, and I don't know. I feel like if you're like me and you're just singing along to a track and you want to take the harmony, I discovered that it's far more difficult to actually execute it than it sounds. It sounds like it's so easy and comes off lightly.
No, it takes some thought, or some years of practice.
Yeah.
It comes fairly easy to me. I just hear them. If I'm on stage and there's no microphone, I'm singing harmonies along with the vocal anyhow. So it's what I do. That's what I hear.
Right. You mentioned writing something down earlier. Do you document sessions and road trips and stuff?
Probably somewhere I have a list of every gig I ever played,
Nice.
But these days, since I put the studio in my house, which was probably 1999, I guess, I write down all the settings, and it doesn't take a minute or two. I write down where all the EQ settings are on things and what microphone and how many inches from an amp it was. And then if I decide, like a month later, I want to replace that note or something, I can just go in there and I can set it back up. I know what amp, I know what guitar, I know what pickup I was on.
Right.
And it just works. So I can read these things. So I've been taking notes.
So you've been documenting things. Do you ever do you write any prose? Do you write any stories about your time on playing with an artist? Or
there's been a few people here and there that have said you should write a book, and it's like that's the last thing I really think I want to do. But I've been around so long and I've seen so much, and every once in a while I'll tell some story to someone and they'll say, "Man, that's great. You should write that down." So I have been.
Yeah. In your songs, perhaps, right?
Well, yeah, but I've been writing, probably 10 or 15 stories that are things that somehow I just want to remember, not with any desire to make a book. And everybody makes a book,
Right.
A
tell-all book.
Another one of those guys, know. But I've been writing. Just it's good to have that stuff.
Sounds like it's cathartic. You can get it out.
Yeah. It's a good thing to do, and also it's a good thing. And I can't do this now, but it's a good thing to record your elders telling their life story. And I've told people that over the years all the time, but I never did it. I never had the opportunity. Now I regret it.
That's a great point. Is there someone you can name that you've regretted not documenting, somebody that you've worked with or close to you? Or
what do you mean documenting?
In this setting, you mentioned how helpful it is to our descendants to have a recording of our story, of a family history or professional history. Is there somebody that you feel like that you wish you could have gotten them on tape or heard more of their story? Or
my grandparents, my great grandparents grew up in Germany, in the Kaiser Wilhelm era, and it was just never talked about. And Hitler wasn't talked about, and I wish I could have interviewed them on what that was like, and they got away before I could.
Right. Yeah, I I bet you a lot of people feel that way too about their grandparents.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
Well, I'm telling everybody, just, get those stories, get the old people on tape or video before they go. It's gone after they're gone. There's a lot you'll wish you knew and you didn't.
Of course. Just can I ask maybe one or two more questions about Lucinda, about your work with Lucinda? Are you writing at any point? Do you guys decide to be songwriting partners?
Really, when we were not on tour, the last thing I wanted to do was hang out with her and try to write a song.
Gotcha. Yeah, I hear you. Are you writing songs on your own when you're on the road with her? Are you in your hotel room or whatever?
Not really. I wasn't concentrating on writing at that point, although I've been writing, since I was 18 or something, but it's really only been the last 10 or 20 years that I've kind of put any effort into that. And now I write all the time, whenever I can. And I've written about probably 9 songs since the pandemic started, so it's just, they keep coming out. And luckily I got the studio here that I can record them.
Are you Pro Tools guy or Logic? Or neither? Or tape?
No computers in my studio.
Really? Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. Record on a Alesis hard disk recorder, and I like press and record and stop and play, and I don't like looking at a screen. I've done records with Pro Tools, a bunch of times with an engineer. Basically, and when I do that, I take full advantage of the technology, but I never really felt like I had the time to go back to school. I figured it would take me like 3 months to learn.
Probably, yeah, or maybe not.
Maybe. Well, probably, because I'm a little on the thick side sometimes, and so I never did it. And like now, I could do it, but now I don't want to. All I got to do is have the gear that I have last for however long I last, and it like it's working. I just want it to stay working.
Nice. And
I love the sounds.
What's the format that it saves? Does it save on like discs?
Well, I record to the hard disk recorder, and then I dump it to a Alesis master link, and burn a disc.
Got it. Nice.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself working virtually with friends, colleagues? Anybody emailing you stuff?
Yeah. Although I don't get many requests to play on anything, and I would do that, but I just don't. I think people are afraid to ask. Maybe
I'll ask you.
Like if I don't want to do it, I'll tell you. But I have done some of that. People will send a file. Ray Wiley Hubbard sent me. He wanted me to play bass on something a month or so ago, and he wants me to sing on something right now, and so I have the technology to make that happen, and so I do.
Is it something that you're interested in, or you don't have a feeling about it one way or the other?
It's something I can do, and it's something I enjoy. As long as I like the music, that's the bottom line. That's the way it was always as far as me producing other people. It's like lots of people would ask me, and I'd turn down 3/4 of them,
right?
Because if I didn't fall in love with the music or the project somehow, then I couldn't just sit there every day going, ugh.
Right. Seems as some people have the ability to just put on a professional hat and get through it, no matter what. Right.
Yeah.
But I feel like music is personal to a lot of people.
I'm looking to make a piece of art every time I produce a record for someone or make my own.
Right.
And my role as a producer is to make the best possible album that I can for the artist, that both the artist and I are satisfied with.
Right.
And we both have to love it. And if I don't love the music from the get-go, then it's just going to be miserable. So I've always turned down more than I've taken.
Nice.
And now I don't get asked much anymore at all. And that's okay. I'm doing fine.
I also admitted to you last week that this is the first time I'm hearing Blaze Foley. And what a pleasure.
Where you been?
I mean, I know exactly. Well, this is like somebody discovering, the honeymooners.
Yeah.
Somebody going, wait a second. I can go back and watch all of this. It's like a treasure trove. So I guess it's good. Where have I don't know where I've been. I feel like I've been listening to music a lot, but I mean, throughout the years, but I always find these swaths of genres and artists that I knew nothing about. And I'm the first to roll up my sleeves and want to get in, but that song Clay Pigeons was killing me. Absolutely killing me.
It's an amazing song.
Is there anything about, I mean, were you working with him? Tell us more about him and your work with him, I guess is what I mean to say.
Yeah, I met him in Austin in 76 or 77. And, he was a big, long-haired hippie cowboy guy. And he was homeless pretty much the whole time I knew him. And so he came up to me. I was playing a gig at the Hole in the Wall in Austin. And he came up to me in between songs, and he had this guitar case with him, and he wanted to show me the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, we're playing a set here, maybe we could do this on a break. And I was just thinking, who is this guy? And actually he wanted to sell me that guitar, and actually it wasn't his guitar. He had borrowed it. And he ended up, I didn't buy it, but I know at least 3 people that did buy it, and none of them ever got it.
Wow.
Bit of a scam, but I went over and I talked to him on the break, and I found out that I liked him. He was funny and smart, and then he had a gig coming up. It was his first gig ever in Austin, and he wanted to know if I'd come to it. And so me and some friends went, and it was a happy hour, and it was in a disco in 1977 or 6 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
And he was great. He wrote these great songs, and I fell in love with the whole thing, and he was completely unique. He was not like any other songwriter I'd known. He was telling stories and passing around pictures of the people in the songs, and it was this kind of show and tell thing, and I was just fell madly in love with his music. And so then we hit it off, and of course he didn't have a place to live, so he started living on my couch, and he was a drunk and a fuck up, and but he was my best friend for many, and so he put up with some of that stuff, and because he was lovable in his drunk, fucked up way.
How do you spend time together? Are you playing music? Are you plotting, the next gig? What are the days like?
What do you mean together?
Well, no, I meant like, what if he's living on your couch?
Oh,
I'm assuming you're seeing a lot of him at that point. Are you guys like in a band together, or is he floating around from couch to couch? Or
we both kind of moved down to Houston. There was money in the clubs in Houston in the late 70s, and so we went down there, and I got a little apartment there. I was kind of going back and forth between Austin and Houston. Austin was a great place to live, but there was more money to be made in Houston. And so Blaze would come with me. He'd live with me on my couch wherever I was. And I started getting him some gigs in Houston. And so we would play the gigs and stay up late drinking and get up the next day and be sober and have lunch. And then we'd go thrift store shopping and just going around. We used to go to the Houston Zoo all the time and look at the orangutans, and we had a great time. And then we'd have another gig the next night, or if we didn't, we'd be at that bar anyhow.
Right.
It was a
good
time.
Times.
Yeah. And then after a while, Blaze kind of started drinking more, and there were some drugs involved, and he started kind of sliding downhill. And at that point, I decided to leave and move to Los Angeles, and left Blaze in Texas. And after that, he kind of started this long, slow downhill slide into alcoholism and homelessness. And he ended up getting murdered in 1989. And,
I read. Oh my God, it's horrible.
Well, he had this really strong code of honor that he lived by, and this strong sense of justice, and he wouldn't let anyone mistreat any friends of his. He was especially protective of older people and children. Mm-hmm. And he had this old man who was a drinking buddy of his, and the old man had a son who was a junkie, and he was beating up his father and stealing his Social Security checks and cashing them and using the money for heroin. And Blaze just wasn't going to let that happen. And finally, the kid came home one time, and Blaze was sitting up drinking with the old man, and he went and got a rifle and shot Blaze. And that was that. Didn't have to happen, but it, like I knew I'd get that call someday.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear.
Yeah, well, it was sad. Didn't have to happen, but in a way it did, and some people make it through that sort of a period, and some just don't. And I miss what he might have done. He never got to tour.
Yeah.
He never got to go to Europe, He only played in the clubs in whatever city he was hanging out in,
You have a solo record that's dedicated to Blaze, right?
Yeah, ever since he was murdered, I wanted to do that, and it took me a long time. There's a documentary film about Blaze called Blaze Foley, Duct Tape Messiah.
I was going to ask you about duct tape because I'm looking at the cover, right? I'm sorry, Gurf. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say Kevin Triplett, a friend of mine from Austin, made that movie, and he spent 11 or 12 years making it. Mm-hmm. And I sort of watched it coming into focus, and at one point I realized it was getting close to being done, and I thought, well, and I realized it was going to be really good. So I thought, well, now's the time for me to make my album of Blaze songs, and I'll release it at the same time the film comes out, and we'll tour together, which we did in 2012, I guess, or 2011.
Okay.
And we would show the film, and then afterwards I'd play a set of Blaze songs, and we did that for more than a year, basically. It was great. It made me feel really good, and I sort of put my own records on hold just to do that. It was something I felt the need to do.
Where does the number 113 come in?
You're referring to Blaze Foley's 113th Wet Dream.
Yeah.
Which is a song of Blaze's. And Bob Dylan had a song called Bob Dylan's 115th Dream. So it was a play on that.
Gotcha.
And I love that song. It's the only song I know that is written about a nocturnal emission. And I thought that would be a good title for the album.
I was just thinking of there's a Poison song or a Rat song about nocturnal emissions, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, there may be. It's the only one I'm aware of. But a CD is small, and you gotta have your name on the cover, and then you gotta have some sort of image, and then you gotta have the name of the album. And then I thought, well, since it's not my songs, I gotta have a third thing on there that explains that it's Blaze's songs. And I thought if I use that title, everyone will understand. And looking back, I think I may have been able to find a better title for that record and a better way to deal with it, because I think it threw some, I don't know, but I think that title threw some people.
Okay.
And for some reason, that album sold less than most of my other ones, and by far. And I don't know why that was, because it's one of the best ones, I think. Those songs are great.
So was it his fascination with duct tape, or was duct tape just a useful, material?
Well, of course it's a useful material, but
musician's friend, I'd say.
We were living in Houston back in 78, and that movie Urban Cowboy came out with John Travolta riding the mechanical bull. And suddenly all these people are coming into the Houston clubs with their Western wear on. It was a craze, so they'd gone to, they went to Western wear shops, and they were coming in with silver collar tips and silver boot tips and, stuff that they'd paid hundreds of dollars for. And Blaze just thought it was absurd. And he decided duct tape looks just as good as a silver boot tip, So he started decorating himself with duct tape, pretending it was silver, and it just kind of took off from there. It was a statement.
It's the for those who are when you see the album, you'll see the duct tape is the graphics are on duct tape, right?
Yeah. Well, Blaze, I had a Nike endorsement in LA one time. Blaze they were giving me free sneakers, and Blaze came out there to visit me, and I took him along.
You had a Nike endorsement?
Yeah, with a band in LA that I was in had a Nike endorsement. So they were giving us free shoes and gear and stuff. And so I took Blaze to the Nike headquarters in LA, and he only had cowboy boots. He had never had more than one pair of shoes in his life. He cut out a Nike swoosh from duct tape and put them on his cowboy boots, and tried to beg a pair of them. And they didn't go for it, but they laughed at the duct tape swoosh. So that's kind of what the cover is.
That's hysterical. I did listen to that album, and it's amazing, and I would recommend it. And if you're like I am, who's just learning about Blaze and other artists, you've got a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, it's really good.
You mentioned, yeah, absolutely. I would highly recommend it. You mentioned earlier this kind of Jackson Browne, rock meets country, Jackson Browne kind of philosophy, or you thought you guys could have a band like that. And I just happened to be listening to "Excitable Boy" by Warren Zevon, and so and I thought of you. So can you tell us about your work with Warren?
Well, his manager came to see me play with Michael Penn. I think we were playing the Wiltern in LA or somewhere, and they called and asked if I wanted to tour with Warren, and I said sure, I'd love to. And then I met Warren and talked to him, and then we had a couple of rehearsals before the tour started. And Warren at one point asked me, he goes, "You're not really familiar with my music, are you?" I said, "Warren, I ordered your album like a year or more before it came out when I was living in Buffalo. I went to the record store. I said, I want an album by this guy." And they looked through the sheet and they go, "No, we don't see anything like that." And I said, "Put me down for the Warren Zevon album when it comes out," because I'd heard about it. Jackson Browne had talked about him. And so I was waiting just patiently for a year or more for that record to come out. He goes, "Oh, I guess you do know my music." And Warren was great. He was a class act, He wasn't drinking. I opened for him once when he was drinking, and we played our set. This band I was in Houston, and then they were looking for Warren, and they couldn't find him. And it took like an hour between the opening act, and finally they found Warren sitting under a stairwell with a bottle of Stoli, and they got him on stage, and he did a fine show. And so I mentioned that to him at one point. He said, "Yeah, I don't remember that." I said, "You don't remember that gig?" He said, "I don't remember that tour." And he was completely serious.
I saw on YouTube that you play some of his songs live in your set.
Yeah, I started doing that a couple of years back.
And actually, wait, Gurf,
because I knew them, they were just ingrained into me. And somebody asked me if I ever play any Warren songs, and I said no, but I certainly could. So then I started playing some when I would think of it.
One of those, I think it's like an outdoor show. Gurf has like 2 million views on it.
Really?
A view, I think. It has a lot of views, like a lot. Cool. So, yeah. So kudos to you.
Well, thanks. Yeah. Well, those are great songs. He was as good a songwriter as anybody,
Do you know if he was alive? I mean, well when did he die? Because I don't know.
Oh, I don't remember what year it was. I know he was 56. Um, that's probably been 15 years, maybe something like that.
Okay, so before Kid Rock, before Kid Rock used Werewolves of London.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. I was reading the album credits, and Mick Fleetwood plays drums on that song.
Ah,
and it's just so, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Just so great. I mean,
yeah.
There's another favorite track of mine on that album, which is Nighttime at the Switching Yard.
Yeah.
It's almost like, I mean, I'm going to draw a comparison here. It's like a Kool and the Gang song.
That's a really unique track, you know. I remember him playing that when we opened for him when he was drunk.
And you're almost thinking, like, I don't know if he can pull this off, and it comes off amazingly, you know.
Yeah, I remember him just dancing to it. It was something. He was a really unique individial, you know, like one of a kind for all time. Him and Blaze Foley. No one ever liked them at all.
Are you, when you're working with him, are you required to, you know, play some of those signature guitar, like slide guitar riffs, you know, stay faithful to him, or are you encouraged to go on your own?
In my way, yeah. I was free to do whatever I wanted, but you know, you want to, you know, people know those songs, they're used to certain things, so you know, you can work within that framework, you know.
Right. I like that attitude. I think to a degree people expect to hear it, so you're going to want to give it to them, right?
You know, I one time I ran into one of the guitar players that Lucinda hired when I quit, and he said, "Oh man, I got to play your guitar parts every night. She makes me do it." So you don't have. I absolve you of that. You don't have to do that. Just make your own parts up. You know, just or base it on mine and make it your own. You know, right. It's like, I know people want to hear something like it, but you don't have to be a slave to that.
Yeah. I think there's some signature, you know, you have some signature parts that are so integral to Lucinda's work that, you know, I could see playing them, but then going off other areas, right?
Yeah, you got to start there, you know. I've had to learn people's guitar parts, but they would gradually become my own, you know.
Right. I think let's talk about your solo work, and then I think we can wrap it up. I got a chance to listen to most of just peruse your solo albums, and is there one in particular would you like to tell us about? Or I know you're gonna
it's always the newest one,
the newest one. Can I just open the door and have you tell us, because it's going to be, you know, an introduction to some people, and go ahead.
The new album is called Kiss of the Diamondback, and it was recorded during the pandemic. I had all this time, and I had the songs, and it was a little bit earlier than I would have put out an album ordinarily, but and the songs were all written before the pandemic, but I sent the songs to a friend of mine to listen to, and she got back to me and said, "That's weird. It's like half love songs and half pandemic songs. How'd you do that?" And I said, "Well, they were all written before the pandemic." And then I listened to them, and I went, she's right.
So they can be interpreted in that context, right?
It just happens that way sometimes, you know, like artists are thinking about things, and sometimes it's pretty amazing how that works out.
So what are is this mostly a band record or an acoustic album?
It's mostly band stuff. I think every record I make sounds better than the one before it, and so I'm really, really happy with the sounds of it and happy with the songs. I think every record has better songs than the one before it. I'm not sure, but that's how I feel. And I think it's the best thing I've done. And you know, everybody says that, but I believe it.
Who played drums on your last record? Do you have a drummer?
Well, or did you play drums? I use Rick Richards on everything I can get him on. And because of the pandemic, he only ended up being on a couple songs on this record. And the rest of the stuff was stuff I did using drum sounds and pounded them out myself, and but Rick is the master. And I knew Rick in Houston back in the late 70s. He played a couple of gigs with Blaze, and he was like this skinny little rock drummer and who wasn't all that good. And then I didn't see him for, I don't know, 10 or more years, 10, 15 years. And then Donald Lindley died. And I was just thinking, what am I going to do? Donald had moved to Austin, and I'd put the studio in, and it was in order for me and Donald to be able to make records. And all of a sudden I ran into Rick again, and he had become great.
Nice.
And become sort of Donald Lindley-like. And I thought, my prayers are answered. And so I've had him play on pretty much everything that I've done in the last 20 years, and any projects for other artists, if they need a drummer, I recommend Rick, because he does it exactly like I want him to do it.
I was listening to Impossible Blue, and is that him on the record? Yeah. Great, very very dark cymbal sounds, and not
all that stuff gets thought about,
Yeah.
And also he's just a master. He knows, there's a lot of drummers that think that you need to hit the cymbals as hard as the snare drum, and Donald is a master of like playing the cymbal really soft and whamming the snare drum really hard. He's got the perfect touch, so.
Does he come over to your house to record?
Yeah. Yeah, we have a set of drums here that's kind of half his and half mine, and they've stayed set up here for the last 20 years.
Nice. So Gurf, how can listeners get in touch with you?
GurfMorlix.com, GurfMorlix. There's a place to email me there. It's like the records are there. You can get a hold of me through there, and that's the only place my records are right now. Some of the older ones are on Amazon and downloadable, but right now this new one, which just came out a couple of weeks ago, is only available through me at this point.
What do you see? Last question, and if there's anything we missed or did not talk about, you're welcome at this point. But where do you see yourself in 6 months and in a year? I'll call you up again.
Well, I'm not going to go out and play anymore until it's safe for everyone.
Right. I hear you.
There's no way of knowing when that's going to be. They're playing baseball, and I foresee that crumbling to a halt. And 250,000 people went to Sturgis last weekend, and that's going to cause problems. And we're the only civilized country in the world that hasn't handled this thing well. And and there's no way of knowing when there will be a vaccine and how effective it'll be. So I'm just going to stay home and make records and try to put them out until it's safe. And
right.
It will be at some point. We'll rise from the ashes, but
yes, we will.
It's all bets are off.
Yeah. Well, Gurf, I want to thank you for talking with us. It was great conversation.
Yeah.
Gurf Morlix, thank you.
All right.
Well, folks, we're going to leave it there for today. I hope you enjoyed the show, and please remember to subscribe. You've been listening to Friends and Music with me, Brian Doherty. Today's intro and outro music were provided by me and my band Treat and Release, which is available on all streaming services. To learn more about me and my work, I can be found on all social media platforms or by visiting my website at briandohertydrummer.blogspot.com. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.